All right. All right, guys, I think we are ready to go. It is moving on to Facebook. Welcome, everybody. This is Corona Hour with Paradise and Lisette, and this is our 4th episode. Very happy that we've made a 4th episode. How cool. So this is our Friday afternoon get-together, talk about specific topics in relation to coronavirus. And we always welcome everybody's questions, comments. We're happy to have you. And today, it's one of my favorite topics. We're going to be talking about OCD. So I'm very excited. And so some of you guys probably know me, but my name is Dr. Lisette Cortes. I'm a licensed psychologist in Florida. I do specialize in OCD and anxiety conditions. And I'm very biased about being excited about today's topic, but yay, very cool.
And I'm Paradise Hafshar. I am a journalist up in New York, and I actually really like OCD. I find it fascinating, so I'm really excited about this talk. I think a lot of people can benefit from it. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here. It's week 4 of this, so I'm glad we're keeping it going. And if there's if there's any questions anyone has, or if there's any topic you want us to cover, let us know. We'll definitely make sure to do it.
Absolutely, yes. And so I want to just introduce our guest speaker for today. This is Dr. Joyce Szentpaly. She's a licensed psychologist who specializes in the treatment of anxiety, social phobia, panic, and of course, OCD. She's bilingual in English and Spanish, and she works with adolescents, adults, and families in helping them gain strategies to effectively manage their symptoms and overcome difficulties. She uses cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure and response prevention as her primary treatment interventions. And we'll talk more about that because there's a lot of different words that maybe are new for a lot of people. So we'll talk about CBT, we'll talk about exposure and response prevention. But just want to welcome Dr. Joyce Szentpaly. We're very happy to have you.
Hi, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me, and congratulations on this Facebook live streaming.
Thank you. We're very excited. It started as a small idea, and it just kind of took some force here.
I went off from there.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So thank you for being on. I think this is definitely one of those hot topics we keep hearing, not only in the world of psychology, but I think just in the media.
Yeah, I think OCD is one of those, we were talking about it before, it's one of those weird, obsessive disorders where everyone kind of talks about OCD. We all know the phrase, but we have no idea what it is. So it's not just the person who likes to buy a certain thing or thinks to look a certain way. It goes deeper than that. It really is a condition that people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. It does affect their lives deeply.
Absolutely.
And I kind of want to go into first of what is OCD? I mean, it's not just, I don't think it's the idea that we have in the media of what OCD is. What is the true OCD, rather than, I just perfection. I'm just a perfectionist. It's not that. It's deeper.
Sure. Sometimes we see it in the movies, a character or someone who's making a comedy, trying to make us laugh. And unfortunately, it may provide some misleading information. It's not a personality quirk, and it may create a lot of suffering in silence because oftentimes, contrary to popular belief, a person may be suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder and not be showing anything to the the rest of the eyes. So there's a lot of internal suffering in silence. So unless the person speaks up and seeks out help, they'll be having a very difficult time without anyone else noticing, actually.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the most striking things when I started working with OCD was that I believe it's 14 years or something like that until someone gets a proper diagnosis. I think it's something like 14, right? 14, 17 years. So people may actually have OCD and never truly get treatment, never get the appropriate diagnosis and care.
So normally teens to late teens is when I guess most people would get diagnosed, or right? Mm-hmm. You said 14 to 17 years, right? So that's a long time to be living with.
Yeah, but since like the start of the disorder, like
Oh,
oftentimes
since the
when
start of it,
like
I'm sorry. Yeah.
you might
So
be
it's,
able to assess back to like 14 years before and see that symptoms were occurring.
wow. So it is adulthood then. I mean, regardless, it would be very, right? No?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. In some cases, people are lucky and parents or teachers may identify it early on and during childhood years, actually. And so the person, I mean, the child in this case, is fortunate to receive treatment. And so this may change the course and the future of how they're going to be managing this illness in a much probably better way because they got treatment earlier. So the earlier, the better.
So what happens in the mind of someone with OCD when it kind of sets them apart? Like, how is it different from the media portrayal of it? So it's not just the person who washes their hands a little bit extra every day. It goes deeper than that. Can you go into like what exactly defines OCD and what kind of compulsions people with it like have?
Do you want to take this or?
Go for it. I'll try
right.
to just chime in.
So like the name defines it, there is the obsessions and compulsions. So most of what we see and notice are the observable behaviors, these repetitive habits or rituals that the person is doing over and over again for long periods of time or in a very specific or eccentric way. And those are to try to relieve the anxiety or discomfort, fear that the person is experiencing. But then there's the obsessions. And these are intrusive, unwanted, also repetitive thoughts or images, urges that the person experiences that tend not to match with their personal beliefs or identity, values, or desires. So it's very uncomfortable. And the person is totally aware of this. So we only have maybe a strange or weird thought here and there, and then we dismiss it. But it almost feels like it's a sticky brain. So I have this thought that is very scary and it keeps on coming and it's highly bothersome, to say the least.
I think a way to maybe like experience it, like obviously not whatsoever close to the degree that like a true obsession is, but it is like when, and we used to do this when I worked with Dr. Joyce Szentpaly some time ago, with our patients, was like asking them to just like go ahead and brush their eyebrow the wrong way. And that sensation is the most like bothersome sensation. And all you want to do is go back and like fix it. Or like all you want to do is just like, you don't even realize that and you already fixed it. And OCD tends to have that mechanism. There is something that's perpetually there, bothersome, and there's a high urge to fix it, you know, regardless of, you know, time, what it might be, what kind of obsession it might be. There's always like that urge to do a compulsion and try to quote unquote like fix it.
So coronavirus is not easy for people who have these compulsions, because if yours happens to be the washing of the hands, or if you are just, if it's germs in general, cleanliness in general, could this make that a little bit worse for you, I guess is the word?
I would say for sure. There are many different types or categories of OCD, and people may actually, more times than not, they experience a variety of different symptoms, but one of them, like the one you mentioned related to germs or contamination, in this case, I mean, the person maybe do it in response to trying to get rid of the sensation of feeling grossed out or disgusted, or out of fear of an illness or fear of death or getting severely sick. But in this case, we're dealing with a real virus that it's getting people very sick and some possibly dying. So it definitely, I would say, makes it much harder.
It's definitely posted like a bit of a barrier or challenge, I would say, challenge when it comes to treating OCD. Oftentimes we ask people to lean into the discomfort and to actually challenge these thoughts by being able to tolerate, you know, the unknown. Like, am I still going to be okay? Like, regardless of me touching these dirty things, you know, can I tolerate this really big disgust, you know, that comes along with like not cleaning off like this contamination that I may have. And, you know, we do those things with like our patients. We ask them to do things that would bring up disgust or maybe like fear or like Dr. Joyce Szentpaly was like saying, anxieties. and be able to tolerate and allow for themselves to be able to function even if they feel these kind of feelings.
So to sit with, if I'm afraid I'm going to get coronavirus, and I'm going to use washing hands just because my hands are very dry from washing them too much. If it's that, then wash them a little less. Sit with that discomfort of knowing that you clean them once, you don't have to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing, because you do have to wash your hands with things like corona, right? I mean, you do have to, you know, make sure that your groceries are clean, that, you know, your clothes are clean, right? So I guess the discomfort sitting with it would be to do it once and leave it.
Right. So in this case, it poses special challenges. So the treatment, I would say for sure, it's being modified. Compared to how we would normally administer the treatment, exposure response prevention, before coronavirus was happening. Now it's trying to balance out following CDC guidelines and what the healthcare providers recommend, while still being able to practice the ERP skills. So like you mentioned, it's the perfect example. So you would wash once, like they suggest, for 20 seconds, and then you would resist going longer or doing it a second time, right? Mm-hmm. That tends to be the case, right? The person may want to do it for much longer, multiple times, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 20 seconds is good, 45 seconds must be great, right? So I'll go a little bit longer and make sure they're extra clean.
It's a very good point, Paradise. I think that one of the main things that we see in OCD is that there is a concept of like never enough. So like clean enough, good enough, safe enough, straight enough, organized enough, you know, etc. And with OCD, it's very difficult or impossible to like reach that place. That's how come sometimes people will take 3 or 4 hour showers, you know? There's always like that lingering thought of like, but what if it's not enough? Why didn't I clean it just right? And so they might have to like go back, do it again, keep going, or repeat it. So I like when you guys are mentioning like, you know, modifying, I think that's something that we definitely keep in mind, what it's like to follow CDC guidelines, but then also understand that it may feel like not enough, and we work with tolerating that.
And all these compulsions, it's because it is a neurobiological disorder, correct? So these are things that are happening in your brain that you are fighting against yourself to kind of stop, right? I mean, it's something that you need to train your brain, I think, in a way, right? To stop these compulsions, or, hey, that 20 seconds was enough, or that bookcase is straight. It's straight enough. I don't need to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. And this also brings up the important point that effective treatments for OCD are, the gold standard treatment is cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure response prevention, but also medications. And that's why that actually shows and supports the fact that this is neurobiological, right? And so there are a lot of, we're trying to regulate chemical imbalance in the brain, and like serotonin and neurotransmitters. So that proves and supports the fact that, yes, like when the person is talking about experiencing discomfort and anxiety, it is very real. It's happening in their body. And so it may be hard to understand because we don't see it, but it is very much felt intensely.
Mm-hmm. Now, I always say the weird part about any mental disorder is you're fighting you, and sometimes you are your hardest enemy to fight, because it is an internal battle all the time of, oh, well, I'm, you know, with anxiety or with depression, it's, well, I feel this way. No, I don't feel this way. You know, and with obsessive compulsive disorders, I want to do that compulsion, but I can't do it, but I want to, but I can't. Mm-hmm. It's tough. It's very, I feel like very mentally draining to have any of this.
Yeah, I think one of the things that like stand out is that you know, with anxiety disorders and with like OC spectrum disorders, we see that there is a little bit of like a glitchy alarm system, that like things that sometimes are not very threatening or not at all start to feel or be thought as to be really, really, really threatening. So I know in past we talked about like panic disorder being that way in some way, that, for example, somehow I started to feel a little something in my chest. And then that alarms me to say that, oh my God, I'm probably going to have a heart attack. So a feeling or something that it may be kind of neutral is interpreted in a very like dangerous way. And so with OCD, it's kind of in a similar way. Something that, an intrusive thought starts to become very, very, very threatening.
This also reminds me of an additional challenge with COVID-19 is that the treatment involves the behavioral component, which entails approaching what we tend to avoid, what's anxiety provoking, with the purpose of retraining the brain and learning that I can withstand, I can handle, I can manage, I can tolerate, right? And that's the ultimate goal, is that to accept that, yes, I will feel anxious and it's not gonna kill me, it will not last forever. I don't like it, I don't have to like it, it's uncomfortable, but eventually goes away. The anxiety decreases. But then there is the cognitive part that sometimes we develop these beliefs that about something that may be very dangerous or threatening, right? And in some cases, the person themselves may tell you, I'm really afraid that this may happen. What if this goes wrong? And and they say, I know it sounds crazy or it's irrational, but I just feel, what if it's true? I want to make sure, eliminate all doubt. I want to have 100% certainty. And in this case, COVID-19, it's real. And although out of 100% in the population, it's a small percentage that dies, some people are dying. And that's scary for all of us, with and without OCD. So it's a real challenge. Because we're not like, hey, that's completely rational. No, I mean, yes, there is a real risk, right? And so it's, how do we balance out? And then recognizing that right now we're dealing with this, but truly, if we look for sources of threat, they're on a daily basis, right? We just don't focus on them and attend to them, but we are exposed to dangerous situations here and there, except we don't hang on to them, right?
And I think that's what makes this unique, is that we've been talking nothing about the virus for at least over a month now. So anytime you go on social media, when you turn on the news, it's going to be coming at you. And I'm just wondering, when you do get all these information waves at you and every narrative everywhere is about one thing, is it harder to turn your brain off? If you do have any compulsions that could be triggered a little bit more by the virus, is it how do I cope with that? How do I cope with dealing with reality versus having my mental health be a priority?
I would say this relates to practicing a balance. So you want to be informed and touching base with reality and what's happening. It's realistic, it's reasonable, but at the same time, too much it can be excessive and it can do more harm than good. So limiting. So how much am I gonna watch or dedicate, even with social media? So some people are choosing to read the news, watch the news, listen to the radio to be updated, and maybe once a day, and I'll just hear NPR radio, or maybe I'll do 10 minutes or half an hour, whatever I think it's right, of Facebook, so that it doesn't become overwhelming.
Right. And with the same kind of spirit of like not enough, like we notice that a lot of times Googling and researching for many OCD obsessions, that tends to be a compulsion, especially I think with like health OCD, and looking up certain symptoms and, and going on WebMD and finding out that you have like butt cancer or something, like typical.
No, and I always tell people when it comes to Googling, I'm like, there comes to a certain point of Google where you're not learning anything. You're just getting whatever fear you have in your head validated. So if it's, I don't know, can I catch coronavirus by touching a pen? you're going to read 10 articles that say, yes, you can, even though you probably can't if it's a tenant at your house that hasn't been exposed to anything. But you're going to get your feelings validated. And I think that that's the main reason to stay off message boards. If you are going to check any symptoms, the CDC has a symptom checker. You can check with a doctor, check with people who actually know what they're talking about, rather than a message board that is full of people who do not have any medical training and are probably going to tell you the wrong thing and may make your symptoms worse. And and there's, especially when it comes to mental disorders like OCD, speaking of pseudoscience, sorry to go on my tangent about it because it really does irk me. There is a lot of, you'll see online of, well, if you just eat this food, you won't have it. But it's not true at all. I mean, eating a healthy diet is great, it's wonderful, it does help your body, but it's not a cure. This is something that you do. You can eat healthy in addition to getting the mental health training that you need.
Right.
And that's what you need to focus on. There's no shame in taking pills. There's no shame in seeing a therapist. That's what will help you. Eating a grapefruit won't do anything. You just won't be hungry anymore, and you just had a grapefruit.
And
but
it will
not
probably tasty, I guess. I don't know. But I think it's like so nice. That's a message that I hope that comes across in all of our talks. Number one, that help us here, like help us out there. Please reach out. Providers are doing telehealth sessions and people want to be available to provide support. And then number two, or just as important, make sure you check where you're getting your information from. Paradise, you gave us a good talk about like valuable and actually like truthful resources. And you made a good point about a lot of people putting out there a lot of information to just promote themselves or, act as if like, they found something new. So we want to definitely encourage people to be a little cautious when it comes to where are you getting your information from.
And when it comes to actually getting your information from a real therapist, not an internet one that, you've some guy on your message board who isn't a therapist. There's different types of therapy, right, for this. So both of you guys kind of have your own style and how the different therapeutics that you do. Can you talk about those a little bit? Like what you look for, what kind of therapies there are out there for people with OCD?
That's an excellent question. But before I forget, I would love to mention, so since we mentioned about looking online and sometimes people are trying to seek out help or trying to educate themselves a little more and they may not know someone who's an expert, a good trusted website that it's been built by experts in the field is the International OCD Foundation, and it's iocdf.org. That website contains a lot of helpful resources, information for sufferers, families, children, blogs, articles, and it even has a database with a directory for support groups in the community free of charge and articles and events, etc. So that's a good website for OCD.
Definitely. I'll make sure to put it in our comments after our talk, so everybody can kind of like link. And I just want to also mention they have a whole subsection on COVID-19 and OCD, which I think is fantastic, super valuable. Definitely encourage you guys to check it out. Thank you, Dr. Szentpaly, for mentioning that. I'll make sure we can have a link so people can access it after. Absolutely.
Yeah. With regards to treatment, it's interesting you mentioned the style, and I think we all have unique personalities. And so each therapist may have a little bit of their own way of communicating and approaching and relating to the other person. But more specifically, in terms of therapeutic intervention, when we go to school and we go through trainings and then we can even do more, there are different what's referred to as school of thoughts or theoretical orientations or treatment interventions. And although there's a large variety and some people are very eclectic, they may use a little bit of everything. When it comes to OCD, for this particular diagnosis, there has been empirical research, decades of studies that have been proven what works and what doesn't. And so that's really important, because unfortunately there are still few people there. I've heard most recently a case that the person was suffering from OCD. Not only were they misdiagnosed by 2 different providers, but they were told to like use a wristband elastic whenever they had.
Oh, I read that online. Yeah.
And that's truly malpractice. That's like negligence. That doesn't work, and it could do more harm than good. So
yeah, you're supposed to like slap yourself, right? Like every time you have it just sounds silly.
This is old, outdated, and it doesn't work. It's been proven not to. And so when someone is looking for treatment, to look at the person's credentials, ask them what's the treatment that you do, and when the person may say cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure response prevention. Okay, what do you mean by that? What does that look like? So they could share a little bit, say some details about what does it entail, because the treatment is difficult, but it's effective. It works well. It takes a lot of courage, commitment, resiliency, but the person will be asked to do things that are uncomfortable. If they're being given, like Dr. Cortes mentioned earlier, techniques for breathing relaxation, that's not OCD training at all. That will not help, manage the symptoms.
And I'd love to speak to that a little bit, that the OCD community definitely puts out always like good informational videos on exposure and response prevention that can be very useful if you're considering a therapist who that you want to see, for you to familiarize yourself a little bit more with what exposure and response prevention looks like. But it is the gold standard, and it is what decades of studies continue to show that helps and works. And yeah, we encourage you guys to take a moment to look into that if that's something you're considering.
And with by the way, I found that fascinating, by the way, that this goes back to it being very hard with any mental disorder to battle yourself, but with OCD you really aren't calming yourself down like you would with anxiety or depression. You're just sit with it, like learn how to grow from it. And I do think it does take an extraordinary amount of courage to recognize that you have this, and also to treat yourself for this, so it is really like, it says a lot about a person that you will take this very seriously, and it is hard work. So, it's good work on everyone's part to be part of this. But when it does come to coronavirus, could this maybe like exacerbate some of my symptoms, or maybe make it better, worse? What does coronavirus do to me if I have OCD and now I live in this new reality?
I would say, we mentioned earlier, there are different categories, and some may be completely unrelated to contamination, germs, viruses, disease, or illnesses. But in general, the fact that we're being asked to keep social distance, I think it's a big deal. It can't be ignored. Oftentimes, when it comes to anxiety in general, one of the common coping mechanisms people tend to use, it's avoidance. And so whatever makes me uncomfortable, I push away, try to escape, run away from it. And so it helps to keep that support network, having people around, involved, checking in every so often, or that, even if it's one friend, relationships. And so it's quite important for us as clinicians to include the family in many cases, even when working with older adults even, or significant others. But in this case, it poses a bigger challenge, because people are not it's just harder to connect with others. And so we're reminded of and trying to stay grateful of the technology and be a screen, virtual. I mean, connection still valid, it counts, and it helps, right? It may not be a real in-person contact where you could physically, let's say, hug someone, but this is real, right? We are connecting and opening up and communicating and helping each other.
Especially when it comes to support groups, I think it's, hopefully they're all being seen virtually and not in person right now, but you do have that support system, because I think things like OCD are very isolating if you don't know there's other people out there for, with the same condition.
Definitely. And one of the things is that we see, especially I think in our younger ones, that when they experience these kind of obsessions, these kind of thoughts, they sometimes experience shame connected to them. And so they may not want to share just because they don't want to be seen in certain light. But I think we've heard a lot, like all of different sorts of things. When someone comes into the office and they present, there's such a big gamut of different kinds of obsessions that I encourage for whoever might be watching, please bring that up to your clinician. Likely they've heard it before, just putting that out there. But so one of the things is, the shame that maybe people may not want to like communicate, but also is the fear that if I say it out loud, does that become more real? And so that can be another barrier for people to share what kind of things they may be like struggling with. But that is, like Dr. Szentpaly was saying, a way of avoidance. And we know that that will only make symptoms grow. So the more that you're able to put it out there, share, work through it, the better and healthier you will be. And so the first step is even just putting it out there and like being able to share with people what kind of things you may be struggling with.
Yeah, I was going to add, sadly, based on literature and what we see and learn from it, the course of OCD tends to be chronic. And so although people can achieve high quality of lives and manage their symptoms successfully and be symptoms free for a while, it does require an ongoing care for like their mental health, just like for everyone else, but maybe specifically with applying their exposure techniques. And so it is so rare, like for a case, maybe I don't know if to say impossible, but for someone who's suffering at this moment, struggling, having a very hard time and saying, let me wait, maybe it'll just get better on its own. That doesn't tend to be the case, right? So and for us as clinicians, hearing stories, actually, the longer you wait, probably the harder it will be. It tends to worsen and deteriorate. I mean, in extreme case, which is still real, unfortunately, some cases need to go to residential treatment, be hospitalized because it's gotten really bad. It can happen. It has the potential for that.
It can kind of like continue to be like self-reinforced in a way. But Dr. Szentpaly, you make a very good point, because in many ways right now with coronavirus, we are having a bit of like a standstill in different areas of our lives. We're not necessarily going on our usual pace, like with our work or our social engagements and things like that. But OCD doesn't take a break. OCD is still there. OCD is still going. And we can't necessarily just be like, okay, I'll just, wait till Corona's over and then I'll go look at that. We can't really do that. The symptoms will tend to get worse.
That's a great point. I would add to that, we're all having a difficult time in one way or another. And sure, every case is unique, but I think most of us are aware, and from the news, like some people have lost their jobs and they're maybe they may be having a very difficult time financially. When it comes to treatment, like you said, some people are pausing on certain things, even if it's a modified treatment where, well, first, it's out of our control. We are meeting virtually, but even if it's not with the same frequency, if someone was meeting with their therapist on a weekly basis for their appointment, even if they were to hold an appointment every 2 weeks, that's better than nothing, for sure. Like knowing and having that support and trust and accountability and no, like, as opposed to, I'll just wait until this gets better. Like, I mean, we don't know when it's gonna, right now we're just waiting. And so probably not the best approach to just quit cold turkey and wait until,
Totally.
Well, I mean, like, I think it's also depending on, like, I think you said, the type of compulsions you have or anything, I think it's tough when it comes to this to ignore, because when it does come to things like, I always mention shopping, you know, you could feel the compulsion to hoard a little bit more, to clean your produce a little bit more, to clean your packages a little bit more. And we don't know how long this is going to go. So to speak to what you guys were talking about just now, if you do ignore it, it's probably not going to get better, and the situation is going to get better around us. So it's just going to end up in a different cycle that may make it harder for you to transition into normal life, because now you're just that much more deep. And then when it's over, you have to go back into the real world, and it's not going to look the way you think it's going to look. It's not like you can turn it off when you can go back to work.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In some cases, when working with OCD, we may do home sessions because there is no other way of addressing the symptoms, like meeting, like the traditional, conventional in the office talk therapy. It's useless. We may need to be hands-on practice in the place where things happen. And that's a challenge for us with COVID-19 as well. I did get to do a home visit not too long ago, but as things continue to become more strict and, you know, wearing masks and the social distancing, it's tough. Now, some people get better. So that's also important for us to highlight and emphasize. It's not all negative and depressing and pessimistic. When people are committed and they're working hard, they improve. And as they improve, they actually may need less sessions as well. You know, treatment frequency should ideally match the necessity. So if the person is doing better, they may eventually terminate, right? I mean, of course.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like self-managed afterwards. And in many ways, though, we talk about like the different things that bring up anxiety as being opportunities for exposure, right? So yes, in therapy and in our sessions, we will conduct exposures, as in like in having the person approach something that is anxiety provoking and uncomfortable. And we kind of like put it together and we have a plan as to like what to do. But the idea is that when people are out there in like the quote unquote real world, these things are happening all around us all the time, you know? And so they'll be able to face them a little bit different. So we practice in the session to be able to be exposed to something in real life and be able to practice it differently. And I know that right now in many of my sessions, I'm talking about the value of these situations that we have in front of us, because it's an opportunity to practice, you know, and an opportunity to exercise accountability, right? Because these things are happening around them and they're having to, yes, take precautions, but not become excessive about them. And understand that there might be like the feeling of not enough, and that's all right, and we're going to work with that. So I try to always like take a space of what opportunities do we have in front of us when things are challenging.
And I'm always a big fan of celebrating small victories. So I think that would probably help someone, you know, with it. And I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor, don't play one on TV, but you know, it's, hey, you did this today, you know, like whatever your compulsion was, and you sat with it for 30 minutes and you did good. You know, like give yourself a gold star. You know, just I think those things we're not going to be perfect all the time, but when we do get it right, I think we just need to like give ourselves a little yay.
100%. Everything counts. Every bit counts. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And one of the things, actually, I don't know, Dr. Szentpaly, I've just kind of started to become familiar with this, but there's an app now. It's called NOCD.
I heard
like the letter N, OCD.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard about it somewhat?
I heard about it, but I haven't actually gone downloaded or taken a look how it works inside.
What is it?
Yeah. So it's basically a way to help people stay accountable to do their exposure practices, and to... Is
it for clinicians and clients?
So it's specifically for clients, and they can connect with a clinician through it, which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah. One of my clients brought it up the other day, and I was starting to look at it. It's super new to me, but it looks like it's a way for people to really help between sessions, you know.
With a real clinician on the other side.
So I don't think it's in real time with a real clinician, but if you don't have a clinician, they can kind of pair you.
No, they have live.
My understanding. They have live too?
Yeah, I'm on the website right now. That's the only way I know this. Yeah.
Look at that.
It says get connected with a licensed OCD treatment clinician, find
Wow.
out what's going on, and get a treatment plan during live video diagnosis assessments. Do ERP, the most effective OCD treatment with live video appointments online,
Look at
and
that.
get support in between sessions by messaging your therapist and using the platform's functionality. So it does seem like it does give you live treatment.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I just thought it was a good way to help our clients also like stay accountable, because it's hard sometimes, right? It's like, hey, that thing that you don't like to do, let's make sure you do it 3 times this week. It's tough, you know, it's
Yeah.
a challenge.
Yeah.
But every victory is a big victory.
Right. Adding to those lines, like in terms of, okay, what is it that I'm going to practice with my homework or exercise scheduling? It can help. And I do feel this is one of those that it's a tip that helps all of us, but also people with OCD to try to keep some sort of a routine while exercising flexibility and you know, being reasonable, but so having like, let's say full free time and like time to spare and like nothing to do, nothing scheduled, no plans, sometimes could not be helpful at all, because the person's gonna just sit and probably start ruminating and having even more obsessions, intrusive thoughts, and the anxiety is going to spike up, may engage into more compulsions, right? Get into a vicious cycle or trap. But then not to be so extreme, or like the perfectionism may kick in, like the need for control, always staying busy and productive and being so harsh and critical and high expectations. That would be the other extreme. So somewhere in the middle of, okay, I'm going to try to do, you know, these 3 things. Hopefully I'll do at least one of these, but having an idea of like something, right? Like that provides some routine may help.
Definitely. Like a guideline, but then not a rule. It's like how I like to see it sometimes, because then it can trigger that like perfectionism drive of must do everything. And it's like, no, we want to take that back a little bit and use this as like an idea.
And when it comes to the ERP treatment, for it to be the most helpful, ideally it needs to be practiced consistently, ongoing. And so for some people, you know, they may set up an audio recording, or they're writing something down, and so they prefer to do it every day in the morning, when they wake up, or in the evening. Some people set up an alarm, some people like using a planner. It depends. There's no one right way of doing it, but keeping in mind that at least I personally, like, if I rely on my mind, for sure I may forget. Like,
yes.
You know, I can't trust my brain.
Absolutely.
I have to write it down. I like using a planner. Some people like the phone calendar, alarm, reminder, you know.
Absolutely.
So routine is important, but it's also important to give yourself forgiveness in that. Like a little space to, hey, it's not perfect, but I checked off a majority of these boxes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we want to welcome mistakes rather than say that we shouldn't have them.
Right.
Right. And I think we talked about that a little bit last time. It's definitely worth re-mentioning of, you know, this cultural that we have of everything has to be perfect. You know, you have to, if you're not moving all the time, you're wasting time. You have to be working all the time. No, you have to take time for yourself. And especially, it sounds like if you do have OCD, you really do need to take that time and set that time aside for yourself and allow yourself that forgiveness.
For someone, it could be, I'm gonna set this time aside to do nothing. And that could be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
Oh my God, that's a big time. Not for nothing, but like in the morning, I give myself like a good half an hour to do nothing. I'm just laying there, no phone, anything. I'm just laying there. I'm like, I'm not going to do anything. I don't want to do anything. I'm going to be nothing. And I love it. It's my favorite time of day.
It can be good sometimes. That's for sure. And so, since we have you here, Dr. Szentpaly, I'm wondering if there's anything you might want to share with us that you've seen in your cases? Maybe anything a little different given the current pandemic, anything that maybe you've thought we should keep in mind a little bit more when it comes to OCD. And I'll chime in. I'm just curious, maybe on your end, what you're noticing.
Yeah, I was remembering a case related to the symptoms that are contamination related, that actually are so closely related with COVID-19, and trying to avoid contact or cleaning and washing, how important it can be to involve the family, because and for the family to understand. So we're not suggesting to not wash your hands anymore. No, that will be completely against the guidelines, and we want to be responsible, but we are also treating a mental illness, right? That is causing a lot of suffering. And so helping everyone around that person's life hopefully understand, and it may be their partner, their grandparents, caregiver, anyone, right? And even more so in the case of children, because sometimes parents coming from well-intentioned in a caring, loving way, by accident they may do things that reinforce those compulsive behaviors, so that ultimately the ritual, it's kept as opposed to broken. So sometimes we may model or just provide explanation or meet with the family, not only the person.
Sometimes it's like, I think I'm helping, so I'm going to feed into whatever it is, and then I'm not helping, I'm hurting. But do you see that sometimes in families? The mom or dad is just trying to be nice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We definitely have those like, oh, that's okay, I'll clean it for you. It's like, you don't like it because it's dirty, don't worry, I got you. But like, we're kind of just reinforcing, and it is like, that's what I'm saying, like, it's coming from a nice place, like people want to help, but it's so valuable having the family understand what actual help looks like.
Yeah, in the OCD world, we refer to as accommodations, enabling, or reassurance seeking, and this all refers to certain patterns of behaviors that are important to be addressed that family may not know about. And then even asking them, hey, like, how are you feeling about it? Like, because maybe the mom or dad feels guilty, and how could I not take care of them? I want them to feel better and get them some relief. And so explaining that you're not being mean or cruel by not jumping in and doing it for them, but them doing it will be what helps them the most in the long term. So
absolutely. With the topic of like family, it's interesting. I think that we also want to keep in mind stress can bring on OCD symptoms, as you guys were mentioning. Yes, it is a chronic condition, but very treatable, one of the most treatable, psychological disorders. But what that means is that, at certain times in your life, if you're going through stressful times, stressful situations, it's likely that your symptoms come up. And sometimes like, fears like of like harm can be one that I've seen keeps coming up with this whole situation. Like, what if I'm sick and then I get my family sick? That's, I think, one that even like anyone kind of worries about. So we have to take a look at, like, with OCD, how much is perhaps like a functional worry versus like a worry of obsessive nature, and one that leads to a lot of compulsions.
What's a functional worry?
Perhaps like one where, if I do want to take care of my loved ones, I maybe follow CDC guidelines to a certain degree, or, I collaborate within the family system. It's like, I want to be able to be part of like a good system there, versus like one where, you are asking them, did you wash your hands? Did you make sure? How long did you wash them for? And it becomes more of a compulsive worry.
and then I may to be like, I guess, enabling. Oh, well, I did wash my hands, but I'll go ahead and do them again for you.
There you
You
go.
know, let me just go ahead and wash them one more time, and you can watch me watch them, you know, and, you know, maybe that'll help you, and that's not helping.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Definitely.
was gonna say also the fact that, like we mentioned earlier, that it is neurobiological, that also relates to the fact that it's highly like heritable. So it is not rare for it to be present in families, generations. So sometimes you may skip someone, but if when we're seeing someone, we always ask about family history, like anyone in your family, mom, dad, uncles, aunts, grandparents, and maybe they don't have OCD, but they may have generalized anxiety disorder or social phobia or panic disorder, and those can also the condition can get much worse right now and be more difficult. And as families are all staying together at home, a lot more discord and argument and tension, irritability, so more stress as a result.
Definitely. So in having OCD, going through the pandemic, I think one of the main things is like, let's not forget that OCD is not taking a break, you know, just because we are in some sort of other breaks, sort of.
Yes.
And so we want to definitely encourage people to seek support, and you can start with a support group. You can start, you know, by just watching some videos, getting some idea of what treatment will look like. Consultations. I know a lot of therapists that do, you know, free 30-minute consultations. Or, I mean, I try to do that just to kind of help people find a space where they can start to address some of these things. Even when, yes, it is a stressful time, we don't want to overlook something that is very treatable and people can get well from.
Knowing that you're not alone, and that although, yes, anxiety will be present and part of life, it doesn't have to be like getting stuck in this vicious cycle of compulsions. It can get better, and there's effective treatment for it.
I think that's comforting.
I think,
you know, just knowing that, like, and not just with mental disorders, I think with anything, you know, just knowing this isn't something that you don't have to feel this way all the time. You know, you can, and that for me, that holds true, whether it be a cold or obsessive compulsive disorder, anything in between. It's, you will not feel this ouch 24/7 there, but you have to just get the treatment that you need to take that ouch away. But it's not going to last forever if you stick with it.
Absolutely. And so, and I think needless to say, as opposed to some of these like articles we're seeing out there, we don't all need a little OCD right now.
No. Well, and it's not magic, you know, it's not, oh, well, I want OCD now, so I'm just going to get it. You know, you can't catch it. It's not contagious. So I'm not going to catch it by being in the same room as someone with it. And I'm also not going to develop it if I've never had OCD, if I just don't have it. And it's not going to just appear out of nowhere. You may, and I think that a lot of goes into the misconceptions people have. You know, like I said, you know, you may wash your hands one extra time a day. You are not OCD. That is not it.
Exactly. And so be careful with those articles out there, guys, that are kind of misleading in many ways and talking about like what OCD really like isn't. And we don't want a little OCD right now.
Are people self-diagnosing themselves? Like, are people coming to you guys saying, hey, I read this article that said, you know, we all need a little OCD, and now I feel like I have it because I've been doing these like really obsessive things lately, you know, and I like my house to be a certain way and I like this. Is there a lot of self-diagnosis going on when you have to tell people, no, that's not you, you don't have this?
I would say in many cases, at least in my experience, I've seen people have self-diagnosed or have a very good hint and they're right. Like they've sought out help because they know there's something off. They don't quite understand it. And they, for the first time, maybe read about it and then everything kind of falls into place. But there is a lot of self-diagnosis in an incorrect way when it comes to just researching online. Google this pain. I mean, a headache may become a brain tumor and this and that, and that's the danger, right? Like so much, like you said earlier, the more we seek and search, the more answers we will find. I mean, anyone can post anything in the internet, right? Without checking their credentials and background. I mean, it's better not to trust just any information out there.
Reputable websites. You know, some guy with a blog is not an expert at all. He's just some guy with a blog.
Probably ultimately the best way to corroborate the information would be to speak to a professional on the whatever the topic you want to consult with, looking for an expert in that field.
You know what? I mean, if you have like a heart condition, you're going to go to a cardiologist. You have OCD or any mental disorder, go to a therapist.
Right.
And even if you might suspect that you might have OCD, it's all right to check in. Many times there might be OCD-like symptoms when there might be like generalized anxiety or even panic disorder or health anxiety. And that's okay. Like, it's all right to address those and bring it up and ask questions. You know, I honestly, I love when I have someone who wants to learn more about themselves. I think that is one of the biggest gifts of therapy. And so to have someone who is willing to explore these things and come in and say, like, I've experienced some of this, like, what is this? Happy to help, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
And that is the beauty of any kind of therapy, I think. And I've been telling my friends this who've experienced anything, and this is an OCD related, to anxiety related, for the first time, is now you know your body and how it functions. And the upside of seeing someone like you guys, you know, if you do have OCD, is I get to know my body on a level that the average person doesn't. So I may feel certain ways when I think I'm being triggered by something. Now I know this, and I know myself on a different level. So this is helpful to see someone.
Yeah, I like how you explain it too, because sometimes when using this, the word, the correct name, right? The diagnosis, it may be intimidating, or for some people, like taboo, or the stigma associated with mental illness. And the thing is, you know, we put a label to organize information, and then it's categorized in sections to understand better. But ultimately, forget about the label. I mean, for some people, they're very much open, and they want to share and educate others, inspire, empower. But some people rather keep it very private and confidential, and that's okay too. Forget about the labels. Learning more about oneself. How does my brain work, and how can I make it better so I have a better quality of life? You know, however you want to describe it.
Right. And I think that's a really good like take-home message, that we're all looking to improve our quality of life right now. And that might mean taking like a deeper look like inside and what's going on, and seeking some support. And like I was saying earlier, we'll definitely post you know, all of these different resources for people to access. We want to help people get to the information that's out there. And I think, you know, I hope that we can make ourselves available for you guys, and if you have any other further questions. And Dr. Szentpaly, do you want to share where they can reach you if anybody would like to get in touch with you?
Sure. So, well, if you write my name in Google, Profile in Psychology Today may come up, or if you go to the website envisionwellness.co, you may find profile and more detailed information on it with the office number and address. Although right now, at least temporarily, for we don't know how long, I'm providing teletherapy services only, as opposed to in person like I usually do. We're adjusting to the new normal.
Exactly. Absolutely. So I want to thank you so much for coming on with us today. This I think has been super informative.
This is great. I had a lot of fun. It was great.
This is probably one of my favorite topics. So thank you both for all your information, because this is so helpful just to know more about. Like I said, it's a common one, but it's one that is misunderstood. So I think the more we can understand OCD, we can help. If I have it, I can help myself. And if I know someone with it, I can help them and just know how to help them.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. I'm totally biased because I love this also. So I'm really glad that we were able to get together and chat. And I just want to introduce our topic for next week before we go. So we have Dr. Steve Archidi. I'm going to butcher his last name. I'm so sorry. Dr. Steve Arcidiacono. There we go. And he's going to be presenting on social distance gaming. So all about how much gaming is too much. Are there benefits to gaming during the pandemic? He specializes in treating kids. And he also wants to talk about like how can we support caretakers of children right now? Because we have a lot of the parents staying home, like a lot of those family pressures right now. And what is your kid doing? Are they being productive or not? And
How much screen time am I
support.
supposed to give my kid? You know, now he's home all day. I don't know. Maybe give him more, less. I don't know.
Absolutely. So we will find out more. There we go.
Yeah.
So we look forward to having you guys next Friday. Tune in 5:30. Bring your questions. And thank you again, Dr. Szentpaly, for being with us today. Really appreciate having you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Bye,
Take care.
everyone, and see you next week.
Bye.